There we go. It has started. So that's fantastic. I'm just gonna pop my my slides up on the screen for you as well, just as a little bit of visual more than anything else. Because as lovely as it is to see my face, it is quite nice to be able to see some visual content. Today I am here to talk about breaking barriers around cybersecurity and how to sort of maybe go through my journey a little bit and then going and talk about how we can all come together and to encourage more people into cybersecurity in general, and how we can. I kind of like it to be a little bit open, so you can ask questions as and when you can. If you do, feel free to shout those questions out as and when you want to. I'm making this as fluid as we possibly can be. But yeah, so it's all about breaking the barriers and how we can all work together to get more and more women into cybersecurity. So I like to start these sessions off with a bit of a word cloud, and the word cloud is very specific to women in cybersecurity. So what I did was I've put a question out quite a while ago around what words come to people's minds when they're talking about when they think about women in cybersecurity or women in tech in general. So these were all the fantastic words that people came up with on LinkedIn when I put that question out. And none of them, you'll notice, are negative words. They're all positive about being change makers, mentoring, enterprising, groundbreaking, resilience, and all of the amazing attributes that women bring to any role or any sector. But within tech, obviously there is a smaller number of women within tech careers, and that's what we want to build upon. And specifically within cybersecurity, because it's my journey and where I've been, I've found that we have such a small number of women within cybersecurity that it feels a little bit like we're in a little silo in a group, where it's like being a VIP, which is why I had the bands at the start there, where it's almost like you're crossing a barrier to go into cybersecurity. So when I talk about me, so I am Katie McMillan. I'm a lead information security manager at Tesco Bank. I have a degree, but I have a degree in journalism, which has nothing to do with what I do now, and it has absolutely nothing to do with any role that I've ever had throughout my career. I went to university with an idea in mind. I thought, oh, I quite like writing. I never thought about tech when I was at school. It wasn't something that we kind of went into any depth. I tried to. I think I failed. Yeah, I did fail my A-level IT, and then here I am, 15 years later. Um, sorry, 20 years later, but 15 years in tech, around where I've had 15 years of amazing tech roles and fantastic experiences throughout that. So I've worked within tech in lots of different roles, which I'll go into a little bit more shortly. But the tech roles that I've worked in, I've worked my way up. So I haven't got I haven't got a degree in tech. I don't have I wasn't expecting to have a background in technology, but it happened. And I found that with so many women in technology as time's gone on. So I've over my time in tech, I've become professionally qualified in my Prince 2 practitioner, my PCI DSS QSA qualification. I'm an ISO 27001 lead implementer and lead auditor, which is the ISO 27001 regulatory standard for information security management systems. I am a certified information security manager, and I have my CISP. I'm a Microsoft MVP as well. So I've got lots of qualifications that I've got along the way, but I've lots of different areas. Kevin, so you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, I was wanting to get your thoughts on the importance of qualification. So is that because you like to be training things and you like to have the badges, or do you think it's absolutely vital that women coming into industry need at least one or some of them, and which ones would you recommend?
So you don't have to have the qualifications. It's entirely up to the person, and to succeed in tech, you don't have to have those qualifications. I was going, I was in an organization where I needed to be a QSA. So within the payment card industry, within the payment card industry, um, you have to have two, a technical and an auditor qualification to be able to become a QSA. And as my organization wanted me to do that, that's why I ended up with all of these qualifications. And if they're offered to you, if you're in an organization where those where it's offered to you to have those qualifications, that's when I would take them up. If I was if I was looking to go into tech as from the very beginning, I'd probably look at doing some of the courses like the ones you've mentioned previously, some of the caps lock courses, some of the boot camps to try and encourage so maybe work out your own passion, because you've got lots of different things out there. There's loads of different portals that you can use for training. But these qualifications were very specific to the roles that I was doing. The way back when I started my career, I started so with project management as well. So Prince 2 practitioner, I ended up taking that because I was a project manager at the time. But when I've gone into information security, I've found that the one that's sort of there was, I suppose I say the easiest to get, the one that I found easier to from my journey was probably the lead implementer for ISO 27001. And then the next one would be my certified information security manager. Those were the easiest routes. There are other qualifications you can use. So there is there's a CISMP, which you can use, which is kind of a stripped down version of your CISM. So if that's something that you want to do, I'm more than happy to give some links out as well. Sort of as part of the presentation, I'll make that available to people if they'd like, with a couple of locations for different courses that you can take if that's of interest to anyone. Does that answer the question?
That was awesome. Thank you.
No problem at all. So I thought I'd go through my journey step by step and sort of explain where I came from, why I do what I do, and what got me interested in the cybersecurity space. As I mentioned earlier on, I went to university from 2002 to 2005, many years ago now, and it does feel like a lifetime ago. But I looked at journalism, decided it wasn't for me. It felt like I didn't feel like I was capable of going to somebody's house and trying to get information from them when they were going through a terrible time or something like that. And that felt like that was what I would need to do, manipulation from a journalism perspective. So I didn't really want to go down that route. Obviously, there's lots of different careers that you can go for with a journalism degree, but it wasn't something that I wanted to do once I'd gone through it. But I'd committed to it and I followed through and I got my degree at the end. I went to be a call center agent when I left university, and I worked for a couriers at that time. So I was an international support agent and searching for missing packages and the like as a call center agent for a long time, because my during that time I had my son, and I had a role, I had a comfortable job. I thought, well, I'll just stay here because this feels like I need to provide for my family. I need to have a solid job, so I'll stay where I am. It wasn't the career for me. It wasn't something that I really wanted to go for. So when my son was 3, I decided I wanted to go a different route, and I applied for a IT help desk job, thinking call center, help desk, it's not too far away from what I do now. I'm sure I can answer the phone and be very nice to people, and then I can start to learn. So I was really lucky to have the opportunity to work on this IT help desk with some great supportive characters. That gave me the opportunity to learn a trade, learn how to do IT support. I started at the very bottom. I was at first line. I was answering calls and then doing first line fixes on the phone for people within an education establishment. And I was finding that I was getting a bit bored, if I'm honest. It didn't take me long to want to sort of push myself a little bit. And I started to learn on the job. I spent my lunch times and my evenings and early mornings going and learning from a different team within the same establishment. and I ended up showing my worth to one of the senior leaders who noticed how much I was working to try and learn this environment. And he gave me the opportunity to go into a desktop management role where I was managing PCs and laptops and the images that are deployed onto them. I was promoted from that role into a team leader's role, and then I ended up in an infrastructure and platform role within another education establishment, and I was running some infrastructure and program management for the infrastructure team. So that was really a kind of a step in the right direction. What I found when I went into infrastructure management was that I was finding things that happen that were sort of, I suppose, gaps in the security within that environment. And I was thinking, I I really want to do something about that. I want that to improve, and I want to be able to fix that. So that's where an ex-colleague of mine sort of reached out and said, "Why don't you come and work in cybersecurity? We've got an opening. I can introduce you to my boss." And then I took the jump and went into consultancy and started in cybersecurity. And kind of the rest is history for me because I've ended up doing cybersecurity since, and I've become an advocate for women in tech. I've got a massive passion for GRC, and so I'm very much a governance, risk, and compliance person. And I'm also very technical because of my technical roles previously. So I have kind of the best of both worlds, I like to call it. I've got a lot of knowledge, little bits of pockets of knowledge in lots of different areas, basically. And that means that I can articulate solutions to all different members of senior leadership, as well as providing that governance, risk, and compliance element as well in any kind of situation. So my role at the moment, I manage data loss prevention for Tesco Bank. So I manage their all their data loss prevention as products, and that's kind of a part technical, part governance role, and that has given me more opportunities as well. But I've been working there since May, and prior to that, I was in consultancy, so I was very much working with lots of different clients and lots of different industries. But it's what I like to do is pinpoint my journey, because my journey is very different to a lot of people in cybersecurity, because I don't have the university degree, and I haven't gone down the route of sort of the boot camps. I got my role in cybersecurity, and then I got my courses. So they took a chance on me, basically, because of my attitude and the way that I am. Way that I see any role is that if you can't you can teach skills, you can't teach attitude, and wanting to do those sorts of roles is almost the half the battle. It's almost all the battle, if I'm perfectly honest. So I like to pinpoint the journey as the start of this, to talk a little bit about how we can get more people into cybersecurity and make it a more equitable place to be. So we've got, and I put this on the screen mainly because people often don't understand the difference between equality and equity. And I know that it's been talked about to death by lots and lots of people. But I also still hear an awful lot of, well, don't we have an equal society now? Surely everybody's equal and everybody has the same opportunities. And actually, that isn't always the case. So the equity means giving the same opportunities by providing those stepping stones if they're required, or of giving people those additional helping hands as and when they're required. So I don't know how does everybody else feel around equality and equity? Do you understand the difference between the two, or have you got any thoughts on how you present equality and equity within your own organizations?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what you're saying about equality versus equity. For example, especially as women in tech, we could be given the equal opportunity to apply to the job and maybe even get it. But the equity is the fact that being a woman in tech, it is a male-dominated environment. There are high expectations and responsibilities, and just overall a different kind of work politics environment to have to kind of maneuver and just kind of push a little bit harder for opportunities to come your way. So definitely understand that, and agree with you in terms of, the equity perspective.
Definitely. I think has anyone ever had a situation where they don't feel that they are given the equal opportunity to speak within say a meeting or something like that? Has there ever been a situation where you feel you haven't been given as equal an opportunity to speak as everybody else?
I would say if I go back 20 years when I started off in tech, very different environment. I was saying to Kevin, it was I was 3 out of 181, and the 3 of us were women, and we took the minutes. And at one point, I remember running a meeting. Clients came in, and they turned to me, "Oh, you're the secretary." I went, "No, I'm running the meeting," and the look on their faces. But I've been in environments very much, not so much in the last 10 to 15 years, I would say it's very much improved, but there is still a way to go, I admit. But there were some really tough times where I didn't have a voice. And it wasn't until I had some really good line managers, all men, by the way, who supported me and would say, "I think Georgie's got something to say here." So I think you have to find the people that will back you, women or men, it doesn't really matter. But I think it has changed. But like I say, there's a little wee bit to go, but we've come over a massive curve since I started off 100 years ago.
I think you're absolutely right. Because I find, and I've found even from even the last 5 years, there seems to be a big push. There's such a change, which is amazing. I mean, I've still to this day heard people say, "Oh, so are you taking the notes?" Or and I still hear that happen now. And you think, but what I do find now is that people are more willing to almost, I suppose, call it out. It's calling out that sort of behavior, because I find that we have more of a voice now than say 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I've had some awful things said in meetings that I at that point didn't feel I could sort of I suppose speak out and say, "Oh, well, actually, no, you shouldn't be saying that about that person." Now I'm much more confident, and I'm much more able to articulate in a meeting why that isn't appropriate and why you shouldn't be sort of talking about people in certain ways. Even doing this talk, even when I've done this talk previously, I've had people kind of call me out and say, "Well, don't you think?" I think there was previously somebody said, "Well, don't the women want to stay at home and look after the kids and not work?" Yeah, and
that happened to me in a bank 10 years ago. "I don't know why you women come to work." And I said, "What if you haven't got children?" He said, "You should. That's your role in life." I quickly changed roles. He was awful. But I have to say, in my last organization, even on the leadership team, when we were having meetings with our board members, everyone took a turn to take the minutes, set up the agenda, and it was really good. It was such equality. I loved it. Yeah.
That's fantastic, and that's how it should be.
Experience that, because when I tell that story, people don't believe me.
Oh, I absolutely do.
It was an awful environment to work in. It really was.
No, I'm very grateful for people. For you all, because you guys have paved the way for me to be able to say that. Although I may have not had, we all have our experiences. Work is work. You're going to come across people and their opinions, but I've not had that particular thing being said to me in terms of kind of women's place, and to think that it's actually it's such a shame you guys had to go through that, but you guys have helped pave the way where our voice is definitely respected, and like that's not a topic of conversation anymore, as it should have never been. So
very true. It's quite rare. Nice that very rare now. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is very.
Thank you. I can't say it was easy. I fell into IT accidentally through a fantastic manager, but I put up with a lot more than that. And I'll stop at that because I don't want to really talk about it. But luckily, I had some amazing men support me and champion me. That's all I can say. So it's we're all going to experience different things, like you just said. But paving the way, I hope to God we've helped at least, because IT for women is a different place than it was 20 years ago, definitely.
It is, absolutely. And I find that more and more we have better allyship, better sponsorship, better just a massive group of a better culture out there for women in tech. And this is the reason I like to talk about it. I'm really bad at talking about myself. So the first couple of slides, I will have probably babbled about myself because I'm really bad at that. But what I can do is talk about the challenges, and I'm really happy to talk about those challenges because we have come a long way, and I've been able to change these slides because I come up with some stats in a minute, and those stats have changed astronomically. I mean, it's about 15% that they've changed in the past 5 years, which is amazing. And I want to make that known that it is changing, it is getting better, but it's because of groups like this. It's because of having amazing supporters and amazing women in tech who will come and sort of give that I suppose that mentorship, and that coaching as well is really, really important. And the little I'm really interested to find out how people have fared in the different workshops that they've been on for cybersecurity as well, because I think I'll do that sort of later on. But I think it is it's interesting because that's relatively new. In those boot camps are relatively new, that the of sort of getting people into tech. So it'd be great to see what people's views are on it later on. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the challenge now, and I'm going to and I like to put this one up because it's quite funny. So if I've gone to conferences, and it's the only place in the world is if I go to a tech conference where there is not a queue for the women's toilet, which is amazing because everywhere else you go, there's always a queue. Go to the theatre, there's a queue. Cinema, there's a queue. Never a queue at a tech conference, which is amazing. So I do love it for that, and that's a benefit. I'm all right with that. But it's yeah. So I like to throw that up. But it is still a challenge in that there should be more, and there should be more women in tech. We should be advocating, and my view is we should be advocating at a school level. We should be doing that from to give girls the opportunity to, or realize they have the opportunity to go into tech. So I think we start to push ideas onto children at such a young age, and if we can, if tech is what sort of a girl is good at, what she wants to get into later on, or if she's kind of aware of the different raft of sort of careers out there that she could be doing, that will then enhance the sort of tech landscape from a female perspective. Okay, so I put this together. As I say, I've changed these quite a bit, which is amazing. So we have, unfortunately, only 24% of the cybersecurity workforce are women. That has gone up. That's gone up by about 5% for that one, which is brilliant. But it's not where we want it to be. We want to try and make that as equal as we can. And we want to try and make that as equal from a leadership perspective as well. So we've also got here that 27% of the tech workforce in general are women, but that is also increasing year on year. I think that's only gone up by about 3%, but that is increasing, which is great. And I personally have seen for the current organisation that I work in, I work with some amazing women, and I get to mentor amazing women as well, who joined the tech workforce in the past 5 years, and I love that. I think that's amazing. I want that to continue, and that's why I do this talk. 3% of women in tech had not had this as a chosen career path. So, Shazza, if I pick on you, I know this is your chosen career path. I know this is your chosen career path. So that's amazing and fantastic. But you are 3%. You're in the 3% of women in tech who've chosen this as a career path. That's a pretty special place to be. And
it's a scary place to have chosen it.
It is, but it's also it will increase, and that will increase as time goes on, because more and more women want to be going straight into tech careers, which is amazing. So I do think that kind of hits upon the school age side of things as well. So if we can get more girls interested in STEM, we can get more women in tech. That's my view. I don't know if anyone else has a view on that. Do you think that so I don't know how many people have children on the call, but have you the people who do, have you seen that as something that's more and more talked about now at school? Is it more equal or equitable at a school level?
So I think there's a piece here about educating the adults. So it's great having someone go in and talk to the kids, but they've still got more influences at home, and they've got teachers that will advise them what options to select. And if you're a girl who is in the 3%, and the 97% of your friends are going, "Nah, I'm going to do psychology, sociology, leisure and tourism," and you're like, "Well, I do tech, but I don't want to do it on my own." Ultimately, that's going to win, unless you've got an adult in that environment that's going to actually go, "No, do it," and I'd encourage you to do it. So I think we do need to have more contact with the kids and advising them, but I think also the educators themselves need educating as to what the career paths look like.
Yeah,
I completely agree.
Yeah. And I have siblings, so I have a sister who's high school age, and I was honestly very shocked to hear say, "Oh, one of my friends is thinking about going to tech," and I was pretty shocked because although I am relatively on the younger side, like what, 7-8 years ago, the concept of me going to tech, or a girl, just any of us saying I want to go to tech, like choosing that, was genuinely like unheard of. Like and if you ever to express an interest in it, you were very much kind of shushed out of it. So it kind of shocked me. But yeah, there's definitely more conversation and like opportunities, and like it's definitely being talked about more. Still not enough, but I think much more than it was at least a couple of years back.
I think you're right. I think there's definitely an element that I've spoken to. I've got friends that are working in SEN companies that are helping with special educational needs, and they are finding that that from a tech perspective, they want to now to pull that in and enhance the tech presence from neurodivergent perspective as well, which is amazing. But then it gets even less when you look at tech careers for neurodivergent women, and that becomes less as well, which is a shame. And I think when I've spoke to a colleague many years ago, it's about 4 years ago. He was advising his nieces, and he advised them not to go into tech, and he advised them not to go into tech because it was male dominated, and he didn't like the idea of his nieces going into a male dominated environment. And then switch it up to 3 years later, I spoke to him again, and he said he's completely changed that after speaking to myself and other women in tech. He feels that now it would be a really good career for his nieces to go into, which is amazing. But that kind of hits on your point quite well, Kevin, in that if you've got people who are advocating for you at home, then that's the voice you're going to listen to, isn't it? If you've got brothers and sisters who are in tech, for example, you're quite right, Shazza, your siblings are going to be more inclined to listen to you because you're a successful woman in tech. You've then got that chance that they will take your experience and run with it. It's nice to see, and I've done some tutoring as well for computer science at GCSE level, and and it was a girl that I was tutoring. She was saying, "Oh, well, I don't really want a tech career. tech career, but then she ended up thinking about it as a secondary career, which was quite nice to see. It was good. But yes, so I did also try get this 24% of CEO roles being occupied by women, and in the 14500 that goes down to 7.4% of CEO roles occupied by women, which just is a bit scary. Only 1 in 4 startups have a female founder. Having had my own startup, I can understand that. It does make you wonder why that is, and what's that deciding factor these days. And of that 24% of the cyber workforce, I couldn't find an accurate number for 2025 of the leadership positions that are occupied by women in that 24%. I do know that that of the companies I've worked for, from a cybersecurity perspective, I think I've only ever had one female manager manage me during that time. I've always had male managers during that time. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, and they have advocated for me, and they have been provided that sponsorship for me, and kind of pushed me in the right direction. But that is a shame. It's just a shame. And I do, as a female leader, I like to try and advocate as best I can for that more equality and equity within the workforce. But I've also put the little diagram there, which I'll pass over to everybody at the end of the call if they'd like a copy. Okay, so things to think about. So I popped here. Where do we start? What are your views on how we start this, and how do we start as individuals and as part of our companies? What do you think we can do to help with that? Also, is that what changes can be made to recruitment processes to make it easier for more likelihood for women to come into tech? As we've got recruiters on this call, what are your thoughts on recruitment processes, and how do we make that more inclusive?
Hiya. I can tell you one of the practices that one of the clients that I work with, they adopt, which is where they have their selection days. We know that there's always a minority of ladies on there, and so what they try to do is they try and group as many ladies as they can onto a selection day, so that if they can group some ladies together, they're not such a minority on the day, so they don't feel that lack of confidence, they don't feel dominated by a majority of men. So I think that's one thing. That's one way of helping and encouraging them through the process.
I think that's fantastic. That's a really good idea, because I think if you've got a selection day and you walk in and it's a room full of people, room full of men, you don't always feel represented in that situation. So yeah, I think that's an amazing idea. And I suppose that does that then could pivot to being interview panels as well. Sometimes if you're not represented on an interview panel, it can be a bit scary. And if you walk in and there's sort of an interview panel of 4 men, and you're a woman going into that can be a bit daunting, I suppose. Less so these days, but it certainly used to be. It used to be quite scary. These days, I think that we're in so much of a better position that people do think about that when they're looking at panels, and even if it can't be a female from tech who's on the panel, it could be HR, or it could be somebody else in the organization who could jump into that role to make it a little bit easier for people to jump into that interview process. Okay, so my other thoughts are, does all your companies that you've worked for in the past or work for now have diversity statistics for your organizations? I know that's quite it's an interesting point at the moment because there's lots of different changes in people's diversity and inclusion programs. Is that something that all of your organisations have or have had in the past?
Yeah, I'd say that the last 6.5, 7 years, the organisations I've been in have had that.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think the recruitment process is better, but there is always that challenge. And I've met a lot of senior women who have felt like a token female, and I think that's the other thing. And I was on a panel for the BRM Institute last year, and people were asking me, who do you deliberately go and choose women? And I was like, no, I choose the right person for the job.
Yeah.
Ironically, my last team were 6 out of 8 were women, but it was just the right candidate. But it's encouraging, but I think that's a very niche role that's very much women orientated because of the nature of how we nurture relationships and the way we speak and the way we act. Not to say the lads that I had weren't great, they were, but they had a certain characteristic that more relatable like women. So but yeah, it's a really tricky one because, and also what I was saying on that panel was women have more choices now. 20, 30 years ago, women did not have the choice to
you're right.
go into the workforce or even go into tech. I remember being told, oh, go and work in a bank or be a hairdresser. You know, that's that was. But yeah, it's an interesting one. And yes, you're right. The current situation with, dare I say his name, Trump eroding that, and I'm seeing more firms doing that in the UK. It's very worrying, and I feel like we're going backwards.
Yeah,
but if we can come together as women and stop that, we can do that. So
yeah, of course we can. And I think that we've if we're in groups like this, we can always we've got to continue championing it, and we've got to push that agenda forward and make sure that people are aware that just because certain companies or governments are changing certain things doesn't mean we have to. We can continue with the same initiatives that we've been going through the whole time. I think it's quite interesting because the diversity statistics in the organisations in various organisations, not everybody knows their own diversity statistics. Why I put it on this slide, but also it is interesting that will then impact the current strategy for bringing new hires in. The diversity would impact that. However, I'm all for you should always bring the right person into the organisation. It shouldn't be about hitting a diversity target, but the attracting the talent. So I'm going to go on to this next slide. So my thoughts here was the different ways that we can help. So I know we've mentioned a few things there, but I've and I did mention earlier engaging with the younger generation around tech careers, and we talked about that. And I think that Kevin's absolutely right. We do need to have those conversations at home as well as at school, and as well as in all social situations. It needs to be available for people. But I also think, well, I also try to organise talks in schools, talks at universities. I talk in universities quite regularly around just being more visible. So having more female leaders that can go out and inspire the younger generation in a positive way is always a great way to bring people into tech as an industry. Also providing the learning and the growth opportunities. So I mentioned earlier on these boot camps that a few of you have been doing. Does anybody want to talk about one of their boot camps that they've done, and if that's been a positive sort of experience for you?
Yeah, I can talk about my one.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So my boot camp was it was a 14-week one, once every Saturday, for 7 hours a day.
Oh wow, that's a
So
big one.
it was quite intense, and it was completely entry level. So I think you start off with no knowledge, and every week new topics, and group projects and things like that. But I will definitely say by the end of the boot camp, I felt like there was so much that I didn't know, because you just have like a greater awareness when you go from zero knowledge to something. So I don't think they can teach you, I think there's ways of teaching you a certain body of knowledge, enough to set you up, and say, okay, this, now go and apply for this job. I didn't feel like I'd learned enough really, to go straight into a job, but that's just me. I'm sure other people have different experiences.
I think you've got, from a boot camp perspective, if you've got your you've given quite an accurate representation of it gives you a basis of learning, doesn't it? But also what I have heard, and this hits upon the not unconscious bias, the imposter syndrome, in that would the same situation, if there was a man on that training course, would they have the same view as you as, oh, I can't go into a role, or would they give it a go anyway? That's because that seems to be, it seems to be more prevalent.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that is. I'm not sure if that's the case with myself, but yeah, I definitely agree with you that, imposter syndrome is something that affects us ladies more than males, for sure.
But I think, I think that it does. It shows more with women. It shows that it's that women are feeling it. I think men are better at hiding it. I think they probably feel it, but maybe can hide it better. As we're a little bit, we're not as good at hiding how we're feeling sometimes, which is not a bad thing, and it shouldn't be a bad thing. However, I think there's definitely there's more of a masking thing, which is from a male perspective, I think. But I don't know. I could be completely wrong. That might just be my opinion. Okay, so looking at the language used in advertising to appeal to all genders, and I think that's known across the board, that there's the advertising in ads for different roles can be geared to a male audience. Sometimes it's quite strong language, and sometimes that is geared to a male audience. Sometimes it's there's certain things about there's too many boxes to tick, and there's been studies where if you put an ad out there with say 10 different essential characteristics, and you need to tick all those boxes, women are less likely to apply. Whereas if men tick 4 of the boxes, they'll give it a go anyway. And that is interesting to me. So I think if they change it to more desirable characteristics, or there's just sort of 4 essential characteristics of the role, it might be that you might get a wider spread of people applying for it.
And I think the data also suggests that no matter how much you adapt the language to make it more, not even gender neutral, more attractive to women, the men don't care. The men don't stop applying. So you still get male applicants as well. So it's not one is in favour of the other. It's literally just getting more applicants.
Yeah, which is quite nice, and it's that I didn't know that as well. That's quite cool. So it gives you a wider spread of all of the applicants. So yeah, ideal. Exactly what we want, which is perfect. Cool, excellent. Ensuring unconscious bias is addressed within the organisation. Unconscious bias is sort of I like to touch upon it a little bit in these discussions, because everybody has unconscious bias, and no matter, anybody can come and say, I have no bias. That's not true. Everybody's got unconscious bias. It's working out what your unconscious bias is, and then addressing it within yourself. But if people don't know that unconscious bias is a thing, within an organization, then they're not going to address it. And if they're going to ignore that. I think having an awareness of your own bias and working on that is really important. I'll use an example. So there's the big example everybody uses where about the father and son being in a car crash, and how then the son comes to the hospital, the father dies, he goes into the operating theatre, and the surgeon comes across and says, I can't run this, I can't do this operation because this is my son. And people instantly go, how can that be? Because it's the son's mother. And I instantly, I was struck by that specific riddle, because I had instantly thought a surgeon would be a man. And that's my own unconscious bias, hadn't realised. I also realised that specific cars, I was driving down the A1 today, specific cars that have gone past me, I assume are driven by a man, and specific cars that drive past me, I assume are driven by a woman. Completely random, but it is an unconscious bias. It is something that goes on in my head. So I need to work on that in myself. And knowing, I don't think anybody on this call can say they don't have any bias at all. Although I'm happy for you to prove me wrong. It is, but it is something that I think in organisations we need to work upon as people. Apprenticeships, coaching and mentoring. I don't think apprenticeships from like these days. I've got a 16-year-old at home. He's doing his GCSEs at the moment and going on to do animal management at college. So he's got he's going, I think it's a T level. Is that what they call it now? He's going on to do a T level, whereas apprenticeships are much more prevalent these days. So it might be that he goes on to do an apprenticeship after he does this T level. I think that sometimes apprenticeships are more suited to people. My other half had 3 female apprentices in tech, and they all still work in tech now, which is brilliant. And I think that going into an organisation as an apprentice and working at that level to work up, is actually quite a good way of learning the trade and learning how to do things. I didn't do an apprenticeship, but I did work my way up, so I kind of like that. Coaching and mentoring speaks for itself, obviously, in this team of people. Well aware of the mentoring and coaching out there, and I find that just having a sounding board for people is sometimes really, really good. Just having someone who can frame your thoughts back to you in a less, because you're controversial. Sometimes if it's imposter syndrome, if it's anxiety, if it's stress, or if you're trying to work out what somebody's trying to say from a work perspective, and your own bias or your own issues are clouding what they're saying, and you need somebody to help you reframe that, having a coach or a mentor is really, really important. I've also repeated myself twice in this slide, so apologies, but I'm looking at the language used in advertising and looking at the recruitment advertising in general. Yeah, I think that's speaks for itself. So yes, so those are my thoughts. And anybody else think of anything that I've missed that we could use to help get more women into cybersecurity or tech? It's not a trick question. It's just a.
No, I think you covered all the bases. That's exactly, I think, the ideal recipe is just first, you talk about engaging with the younger generation. That's definitely the right thing to do, because using myself and like other people's example of like, I did not know anything about it, and it's or that even when I was at university, I actually had studying quite literally cybersecurity, I had a very, very limited understanding of what careers there was in terms of cybersecurity. I thought I could only ever be a hacker, and I was like, okay, sure, let's go do that. So definitely kind of educating and engaging with younger generations about tech careers, and examples of female leaders. That's definitely a great thing as well. You always like to see no matter who you are and what you are, you like to see representation where you go. Just it makes it easier to kind of put yourself in that situation or feel like you know you have someone alongside with you. And then of course learning growth opportunities. I think if we didn't receive that, then we wouldn't have gotten very far in terms of career. And then I'm not going to go through literally every bit, but the point is I agree with everything you've said. I think you really covered all the bases here, and I think I definitely really agree with it. And especially also recruitment stuff, definitely the language helps, as even if it's a little line where it's like, oh, we encourage, like it's like, oh, okay, they've thought about it, so it's just nice. Yeah, so I agree.
Excellent. Oh, that's fantastic. Georgie, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it before about talking to the educators. I think going to the younger generation is all well and good, but when you've got a counsellor at school saying you can only do this, this, and this, we all know we've got certain qualifications from school. I shouldn't be doing what I do. I accidentally fell into it, literally, and got pulled along for the ride by a very inspiring boss. So I think it's the educators. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of schools, there's a lot of teachers and guidance counsellors who are fantastic out there, but it will depend on the geography and the level of talent children have, etc. I won't go into the subtleties, but yeah, I think school is such a big part of a child's life. And I know for a fact that I was told certain things which changed the way I thought about myself. My older brother, who's very successful, was told he would never be successful, and he became the editor of the FT, for example. But he never thought he'd be very good at English, yet he was a maths god, and it's very ironic, the opposite way around. So I think it's really that I don't know who to educate the educators to say you can't put kids in a box, because it happens all the time. And just because you're bad at English, or you're bad at math, or you're bad at this, that, and the other, or you're great at this, doesn't mean like your qualification, from university, you go on different paths. And I think they have to be I know they have to be very technical, and they have to judge the child from their educational level, but they've got to look wider at the person as a whole rather than stick them in those boxes. And I think that's what's happened to women over a number of years. Like you and I have just said, we've had that experience. Well, you should stay at home and have children. I know a lot of young women now who are just avoiding getting married and having children because they want a career and they want to travel and they want to be independent and they don't need anyone, and it's, but good on them. But if you want to get married and we have children, I know I've got a career friend who's 36 years old, having her first baby, massively senior, not in tech, but she's going to go back and she's going to figure it out with her partner. But yeah, I think that educators need more education, because
I completely agree.
So technically driven. Everyone's got a phone. We didn't have that 20 years ago. I live on my phone. It's got everything I need. And my nephew was 11 years old and knew more about his iPhone than his father did. So I think it's educate the educators, I think, is a big deal. And we don't think about it because we think it's too far down. We're too young, but it's not. Let's educate them.
It's not. Very true. Very true.
Sorry, rant over.
No, go guys. It's fantastic. It's all good. It's all good. So, Gabby, you've got something to add?
Yeah, it's also in the same sense about educators, because when I was in high school, most of the teachers in technology were women. But most people they were encouraged was guys. Like we had, when we were in higher classes, we had coding, which one of like experiences that we did, like with IT, and like the guys were encouraged to do coding. The girls was like, oh, you guys can learn how to do like develop websites or other things, but we were not encouraged to try or even like understand coding. It's almost like it's not for us.
Really? That's shocking. That's awful.
Yeah. So I think it's like also like they have the bias that they already have in their heads. So this is for guys, this is for girls. So sometimes like I think they need to be educated, like give equal opportunities and like at least like show them what it is, because some of them in high school don't even understand like what is what or what they know or what can they possibly do until the teacher shows them.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's it's really education's key. Absolutely, education is key from school level, at home level, and at university level as well. Because I've seen an awful lot of bias at university. Yeah, it's all fun and games, isn't it? Kevin, I think you were next.
Yeah, there's probably two things I'd add, but you get a very long flow chart if you start adding all these things. But they're both kind of related to the process beyond getting the applicants, because I think
Yes.
there are so many places in the recruitment process you can lose people. It's not just getting them in the funnel in the first place, it's keeping them in the funnel and keeping them engaged throughout the process. And it's not necessarily a man versus woman thing. I just think it's in general having human centrically designed processes that mean that you're not discriminating against anybody in that process, so that it might be that the handful of women you found happen to be neurodiverse and therefore fail at one of the assessment stages you've got because it doesn't cater to their needs, things like that. So it's think about all your process and make sure that you're not going to lose a good candidate because of you're asking them to jump through the wrong hoops. And then the second part of that is like longer term retention, and make sure you've got good places to work with equitable processes right throughout, because if you constantly lose women from the workplace, you're never going to close that gap. Whereas if you keep them in the workplace, you'll have more role models, you'll therefore have more people want to go in, and it'll just be easier and easier. And that isn't always about necessarily creating things that are great for the women and give the women an unfair advantage over the men. One of the things that I advocate for quite a lot is equal rights around mat leave and pat leave, because then that takes 100%. The pressure off the woman. It doesn't mean the woman has to be the primary carer. If I have the choice of taking 6 months off work to help with the childcare, my wife can go back to work quicker, and it'd be my career that gets stunted rather than hers.
I
and that's
completely
what we
agree.
do in our family. So if it's all on the woman, then societally is no choice but for her to be the one that makes sacrifice.
I think in most countries now, so I did a similar talk in Norway, and they were like, yeah, we have equal leave. They have to have equal leave, and I think it's actually enforced. They have to have leave, so both parents have to have equal leave, which is brilliant, and I think that's a fantastic way to go. My other gripe about that is that, and this works both ways. I don't like that that a woman can be asked, oh, so who's babysitting your child for you, if they go away for work, but a man's not usually asked that question. And it's like, well, I don't have a babysitter, their dad's got them, or my partner's got them. It shouldn't be that way. And that has also improved in the last couple of years. But the amount of times I used to be asked when I travel for work, who's got your son? Well, his dad.
Yeah, well, if we had kids in our family at the moment, if the school needed to get in touch with anyone, it would be me. I work from home. I'm the one that would be able to do that and get them. But the assumption would be that my wife, who actually travels to work and might be the other end of the country, would be the one that gets the phone call. She's just insane.
It is, and the same for me. Yeah, my other half is home more than me, and still I get a phone call first, even now. It's bizarre. Sorry, Remy, you've had your phone lined up for ages.
No, that's okay. No, I just wanted to add to what Georgie and Gabby were talking about the educators, because I worked as a teacher in schools for many years, and I remember going to a conference actually, and it was all about STEM, women in STEM, and how females do not. There's such a low number of females choosing STEM topics at university and going into STEM careers, and how we can address that in our schools. And since then, my eyes were open to, so many issues within primary education. And so things like you know, educating the educators, I completely agree. You know, we think that in order to get girls into these topics, it's all about just having sort of equal opportunity. But actually, it's not just equal opportunity. It's actually getting into these areas, these clubs, and actually ensuring that girls feel comfortable to stay there.
Yes.
Because if you go into these clubs, you find that the majority of, you know, people in there are boys.
Yeah.
And it's the small minority of girls that do go, what happens is that they end up dropping out because they don't actually feel comfortable in these clubs because they're a minority. And if you think
Yeah.
about how, Katie, what you said, if a woman attends an interview and it's a panel of all males, I mean, how would a girl feel going into a club with a classroom full of boys? You
Oh
know,
yeah.
it's exactly the same feeling, probably even worse.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot. There is a lot that can be done within schools and education. And, you know, I think the flowchart you put on the last slide was, you know, fantastic. And I think, you know, schools need something like that as well. You know, how
Yeah.
many clubs do you have? What's the number of children, boys versus girls that go? What's the dropout rate? You know, how are you safeguarding girls' places? You know, are you following up with the
Yeah.
dropouts? You know, there's so much we can do.
Definitely. I completely agree with you. I think it's almost like they need tech champions that are girls who will sort of boost that for them within the schools. But again, it's a hard. It's educating the educators. You're absolutely right. We need to. I've offered to speak at lots of schools, but I don't think I've ever spoken at a primary. And you're absolutely right. That's probably the best place to go. Primaries. Yeah. And I have also, and this is less an issue with, it's not just girls from this perspective. You've got even their phones and what they have access to on those phones, and teaching them about the security of their own data. That to me is paramount, and trying to get and that's equal across the board. I've had issues. My son's clicked links he shouldn't have on his phone because his friends sent them to him. That sort of thing. It's a wider piece, and having educating the educators is key to that. And I suppose that's the conferences you're talking about, Remy. That's probably a good place to do it. Maybe that's something that I can reach out to some people about. That's a good idea.
There is a TED talk on the Mighty Network space from one of our members, Rebecca Taylor, who's a security lady, who delivered on that topic of kids and their digital footprint and all that kind of stuff.
Excellent.
So yeah, go and check that out.
Will do, definitely. I think that's it's really important, isn't it? That's ideal. Fantastic. Well, that's kind of all of the slides that I've got. I've realized I've gone well over time, so I'm really sorry. Always the case. But has anyone got any last questions or any last thoughts?
Not for me, but just wanted to thank you. It's just amazing to listen and see what women are doing in tech.
Oh, thank you very much. That's great. Thank you very much for listening to me. However babbled it was, I apologize.
No, it was wonderful. Thank you.
No, I agree, Georgie. It was fantastic talk, well worth coming to hear. And it's fantastic to really just hear all about not just your journey, but the kind of the active thought you put into it. And the ideas you come up with in terms of encouraging. A lot of people can, you know, be passive, and that's okay. You know, they can look after their own thing and do their own thing. But to kind of see someone who works so hard for, you know, to be in the position they have, and not just stop there, continue to want to make things better and easier for everyone involved, and spend, you know, their evening essentially. We wouldn't be here if you hadn't been, you know, so willing to give up an hour of your time, if not more, prepping for stuff. So yeah, no, thank you so much.
No problem at all. Thank you very much, everybody. That's ideal. Thank you.
Can't say any better than what Shaz just said, really, can you? You got like the perfect hype man there. Thank you very much.
I know, yeah. I'm bringing Shazza everywhere now. That's it.
Where do you need me next?
Love it. Thank you very
Cool.
much,
No,
everybody.
well, as I said, thank you very much, Katie. Really appreciate it. And if anybody has any suggestions on follow-on topics, anything that they'd like to hear around generally women in tech or specifically stuff for our information cybersecurity practice, let us know. And we'll have more of these great sessions. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good
Thanks,
evening, everyone.
everybody.
Good evening. Bye.
Bye now.